just because something wins a bunch of awards doesn't make it good, right? Like, we really need to acknowledge this fact about the gaming industry, right? Like, look at the movie industry. Nobody takes the Oscars seriously. Nobody, no serious film enthusiast will tell you that the Oscars is a viable metric for anything, except maybe whose dick needs to be sucked that year, right? Like, it is a political pandering mess. The Oscars are a complete joke and have been probably since their very inception. And now that mindset, that politically driven propagandish mindset has seeped its way into the Game Awards, right? The Game Awards is fundamentally no different. The Game Awards from other outlets are fundamentally no different, right? This is why Baldur's Gate 3 was lauded so much over far superior games like The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, WarioWare Move It, Super Mario RPG, Fire Emblem Engage, Cereza and the Lost Demon. The list goes on and on and on. Right, Baldur's Gate 3 was smacked down by dozens of Nintendo games in relevancy and sales, but it was pushed to the forefront because game journals were desperate to try and get one of their games in there. Right, they also shilled for Alan Wake 2, which was also like an ESG baby. So, like, again, this is the reality of the modern gaming industry, right? Is that these activists are promoting bad games that promote their values onto an unsuspecting gaming populace, right? Like, the really good games go ignored and always have been. Like, I've been talking about this for a long time. So with that in mind, I do think this needs to be the critical goal of Gamergate. The go-to thing right now. We really need to stop acknowledging the Game Awards. We need to stop pretending as if they matter or if they have any say in what's good and what's not at all. Because whenever, like, the subject of Baldur's Gate 3 comes up, and whenever someone has to defend it, it's always the same tired argument. But it won Game of the Year awards. Yeah, so did The Last of Us Part 2. And that was like one of the most hated games of that year, right? Like, again, we've been over this time and time and time again. The video game journalism industry is corrupt. You cannot take them seriously. The same industry that tries to pretend that Princess Peach Showtime is a mid-release is pushing this idea that, like, oh, Baldur's Gate 3 is the best. Like, again, they downplay good games all the time. They promote bad games all the time. So why exactly am I going to take these people seriously ever? There is no reason to do so at any point for any reason, essentially. The the industry needs to just uh, go away, essentially. Fans need to understand that the game journalism industry is not something that we should be relying on for game coverage at all. Like, we should not be acknowledging reviews at all. We should not be acknowledging let's plays from them at all. Like, we should not be acknowledging their award shows at all, because these shows are nothing but propaganda. One of the things I'm always told is that, like, but Breath of the Wild won in 2017. Are you willing to give up the award? Yes. I have always been vocal about how giving Zelda awards is just a way for the gaming journalism industry to, like, pretend that it's less biased than it really is, right? If they never gave any Nintendo games awards ever, people would begin to realize that something was up. But by occasionally tossing us like breadcrumbs, they're trying to keep us complacent, keeping us from noticing certain things, right? And in 2023, they went full mask off with Mario Wonder getting shafted the way it did, and Tears of the Kingdom getting shafted the way it did. And it wasn't even just those games too. I would say Hogwarts Legacy is another good example. But the reality is, we are at the point now where the biggest, most relevant games, like the most critically acclaimed, the most popular, right, the ones people are actually playing, are getting shafted in favor of absolute nonsense that nobody cares about, right? Baldur's Gate 3 was outperformed by Starfield, Hogwarts Legacy, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and probably, possibly, like, Super Mario Bros. Wonder as well. Like, there is no recovery from that, right? Like again, Baldur's Gate 3 was not the big massive success story that the gaming establishment tried to pass it off as, right? The game was a niche thing in a niche genre that certain people were enthusiastic about, right? But it was never ever going to like do gangbusters, and it was never going to be like the next Witcher 3 essentially. And that fact has become very apparent in the following months after that award was handed out, right? What's happened? Hasbro has split up with Larian. Larian's never going to work on D&D again. They're talking all this nonsense. Like some behind the scenes trouble is brewing, right? Um, like this isn't how you act after like a success story, right? To me, and I think this is becoming more and more obvious with each passing year. Like I do think a lot of the success stories in gaming are a complete fake, completely fake, right? Like right now, the Warhammer 40K community, right? They announced some very unpopular retcons, and people are complaining and saying they're going to boycott products, right? The narrative is that these people don't matter and that like, ooh, Warhammer 40K is doing better than ever. But to me, it seems very, very evident that like the Warhammer brand is on the decline. Like as a casual audience member, as someone who's been following along with this for a long time, like I can see that people are becoming less and less enthusiastic about the brand, right? And it is beginning to collapse, even though there are like lots of people in the community who are like screaming otherwise, right? Trying to convince you that like, no, Warhammer is better than ever. Oh man, female custodes. Like you just know that they're just posers doing it for clout and attention, right? I'm very strongly reminded of what happened when Lindsay Ellis published her book Axiom's End. For those of you who don't know, I covered the book extensively on my channel. I believe it's my most viewed video ever, actually. Yeah, I bought the book and gave it a review and like trashed it, and I noticed that the people who were praising the book, right? The vast majority of the audience for it, like they were buying the book, posting like a photo app of them reading it, and like, oh, I'm so excited to read the, and Lindsay Ellis's work. And then like the sequel comes out, and then it bombs, right? It's a complete disaster. Nobody buys it. So like again, I really don't think that the vast majority of people who bought Axiom's End read or enjoyed it. They bought it for the photo op, for the clout of associating with Lindsay Ellis, an extremely successful name in BreadTube, right? And then they never touched the book again. That is my opinion of the Warhammer 40K wokies, right? People pushing like for the retcons and who are enabling it. And I think it's the same way with the gaming community, right? With the Baldur's Gate 3 enthusiasts, like much like the Dragon Age Inquisition enthusiasts, like these people don't play that many video games. And it becomes more and more apparent the more you talk about them is that these guys really have no awareness at all as to like what's actually available on Nintendo Switch, right? Like how many times have you seen people try to tell you that like, oh, this is a slow year for Nintendo Switch. This is going to be the last year for the console ever, but in reality, we're like 2 months away from June. Like Nintendo can drop a Nintendo Direct anytime. Like I think right now there's a Indie Direct airing as I record this, but which I haven't seen yet. But like my point is that coasting off of like awards just shows that you have no confidence in your own ability to like discern what is good and what isn't, right? When it comes to someone like me, like I'm very comfortable coming out and saying yes, Cereza and the Lost Demon was one of the best games of last year, right? Because of its innovations, because of how charming it was, its visual style, its design, its creativity. The story in particular is the best Bayonetta has ever gotten, right? Like there are lots of things to like about Bayonetta and the Lost Demon, right? Cereza and the Lost Demon, right? But you didn't see game journalists acknowledge it at all. It didn't even get nominated for like best indie game or like best art style or best music, like at the Game Awards. Does that stop me from praising those things? No, because I understand that that game was killer because I enjoyed it very much, right? Same with like 13 Sentinels, right? Like it didn't win anything at the Game Awards, but ooh, like it's still a great game. Like that is my mindset when it comes to like dismissing these Baldur's Gate 3 allegations, right? Like if all you can do to hype up a game is talk about how many awards it's won, you really have no ground to stand on. The reality is, Tears of the Kingdom did far more to video games than Baldur's Gate 3 ever will. Like all anybody's been able to do with Baldur's Gate 3 is like try to convince you that like, oh, your choices matter in this one. I've been hearing that since the original Mass Effect. So seeing Tears of the Kingdom like actually do something with its like involved physics mechanics and the Ultra Hand and like building things, like it really is. There really is nothing quite like it, and you are seeing more and more people talk about that uh, over the past year. Like as more and more people get into Tears of the Kingdom, they're learning more about it and realizing that like, wow, this really is one of the best games ever made. Not just one of the best games of the year, but one of the best games ever made. Period.